Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 9 of my 150 favourite films, obviously not ranked, because that would be insane. It's been a wee while since part 8, but let's start part 9 with a bang. Again, you can let me know about your favourite films, which ones in this list you agree with and which ones I'm talking complete nonsense. So let's start with a bang with Masaki Kobayashi's The Human Condition, which I only finally got around to watching a relatively short time ago. I did a video on it because it did blow me away. This is the special edition of the Arrow Academy with a lovely cardboard box, because we all love our cardboard boxes. This one comes with a booklet and the 3 individual cases. This is a phenomenal film about war and, strange enough, the human condition. It is 9 hours, so it can be a little bit intimidating, but you can split it up into 6 parts as the original Japanese version, or 3-part international version. I watched it as the 6-part edition, and it really makes it breaks down a lot easier. And once you get into the story, once you get into the character of Kaji, played by Takashi Nakadai, Tatsuro Nakadai even, it kind of flies by, and your apprehension of, oh, it's a 9-hour film, just kind of goes out the window, because you're hooked to see what happens to his character, which is a lot. He starts off as being a pacifist with communist leanings, doesn't want to go to war, but he kind of gets embroiled in the war. He tries to make decisions that are the best, but he's human, so he makes mistakes. It costs people's lives, and it changes his view of the world, his view of philosophy changes as he gets the realities of war and the realities of living, period. There's a quote in the back of the box that says, "Kobayashi's monumental film can clarify and enrich your understanding of what it is to be alive." Obviously, quite a lot of quotes on the back of boxes can be a little bit hyperbolic, but that one's actually fair enough. Like I said in the video that I made on it, I love Akira Kurosawa. He's my favourite filmmaker, and I always kind of considered the best Japanese film to be a Kurosawa film, but this made me reassess quite a lot of things in my life, and this might actually be the greatest Japanese film ever made. It's phenomenal. It's a great performance by Nakadai, who, again, I've said in my video that I've perhaps not disrespected, but obviously Mifune and Takashi Shimura for me have always been kind of the gold standard, but Nakadai himself, considering he was so young, this was really his first proper leading role, and what a role it is. Again, films are so hard to make decently when it's only like a 90-minute film. So many disparate elements that have to come together to make even a half decent film. So to make a 9-hour film that is engaging and riveting and shot beautifully and beautifully acted, that works, is just an amazing achievement. I mean, Kobayashi didn't make a lot of films, but also Harakiri and Kwaidan and The Human Condition, that's kind of more great films than a lot of filmmakers make in a 50-year career. So that's The Human Condition. If you haven't checked out my video on it, go check that one out as well. It's a phenomenal film, and a film that masterpiece is probably an understatement. Next we go to 1991 France for Delicatessen, Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro's first film. Obviously more famous for Amélie, but Delicatessen for me is their best film. City of Lost Children, their second one, is still wonderful as well. It's my favourite post-apocalyptic France cannibal film. It has that Jeunet look of browns and greens that his palette throughout his films are kind of built on. It's got a great soundtrack, which I have. It's beautifully acted. Dominic Pignon, who's one of Jean-Pierre Jeunet's regulars, he was even in Alien Resurrection, plays a circus clown who, facing bad times, turns up in this hotel on the outskirts of a town ravaged by war, where people are scrabbling to make ends meet, and meat being the operative word. It's just full of life, even though the atmosphere is full of death. There's wonderful set pieces. It's an absolute joy. I remember seeing this in the cinema in the early 90s. It's just a wonderful film that has been, parts of it have been taken off. There was an advert in the 90s that pretty much ripped off a scene in the film almost shot for shot. It's just a delightful little cannibal film. Next is Don Siegel's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1956 original. This is the olive Blu-ray release, which is really good. The extras are really quite hard to read, but you get two commentaries. There's a commentary actually that features Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter and Joe Dante, which is almost worth buying the film itself. There's a ton of bonus features. It's only 80 minutes long. It never outstays its welcome. It rattles along. It's a perfect film in economy. It's a great story. You can read it as a metaphor for lots of things. It's been remade several times. The 1978 Philip Kaufman with Brooke Adams and Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy is wonderful as well. Veronica Cartwright. The Abel Ferreira one in the early 90s is interesting. The Nicole Kidman, Daniel Craig one, less so. Kevin McCarthy just gives this wonderful performance as a small town doctor, turning back to a small town and people acting strangely. It's got a great ending, really 50s ending. Again, you can pretty much put any panic or any time where human beings were questioning what's up with the world, what's up with our neighbours, and you can put Invasion of the Body Snatchers in as a template for how to do that kind of thing really well. I know a lot of people prefer the 78 version, but for me, Kevin McCarthy really makes the 1956 version my favourite version. It's so much fun, and again, 80 minutes, it just rattles along. There's not a wasted second. You know, very much like The Thing from Another World, or especially Carpenter's version of The Thing in '82. It's really about identity, what makes us human. It's just a great wee film squeezed into 80 minutes. Next, I blame Nazarene Prod for this. That's Phantom of the Paradise for Brian De Palma, which is a film I probably saw, well, I did see when I was a lot younger and thought it was good. But watching it again over the last few years on Nazarene Prod's, he did a video on it. It's just an amazing film. Rocky Horror Picture Show was always kind of my favourite musical, but Phantom of the Paradise, believe it or not, has overtaken it. It's the Scream Factory edition. It's a mix of the Phantom of the Opera, Faust, and Portrait of Dorian Gray. The music itself, done by Paul Williams, who did Bugsy Malone, is absolutely wonderful. It's almost a history lesson of the history of music. It's just an absolute blast that just gets better every time you watch it. And again, the history lesson of the music is different songs are different styles. And again, just that mix of the lurid colours, Phantom of the Opera, Faust and Dorian Gray, it just all comes together. It probably shouldn't work, but it's just so enjoyable, and it's literally one of those films I could watch again and again and again. Hail the beef. Next, yes, it's 150 favourite films, so obviously I'm going to crowbar in another John Sayles film. It's Lone Star. Probably his most successful as far as the box office, perhaps, and certainly with the Academy of Motion Pictures, because he got an Oscar nomination for his script. Sayles always says the reason Lone Star kind of got a bit of publicity because, one, it's set in Texas, and there's lots of people in Texas and they like to see films about themselves, and two, it's got a gun in it. So how did he translate his Oscar nomination? He did Men with Guns, which is a film which has about 4 lines in English in it, and the rest is subtitled. That's the best way to follow up Oscar nomination. This is just such an amazing film about history, set on the Tex-Mex border. It's how history, you can't really escape it. It stars Chris Cooper as a sheriff who isn't the best sheriff, who has a much more famous father who was a sheriff, but he learns over the course of the film the secrets that his father carried and how that affects his life now and how it affects the whole community, because again, Sayles is about community first. Clifton James, Chris Christopherson is wonderful as Chris Cooper's dad's nemesis, colleague. Chris Cooper's dad's Matthew McConaughey before he was huge. Frances McDormand makes a lovely cameo as Chris Cooper's ex-wife. Joe Morton's in it, Elizabeth Pena. Obviously the music's by Mason Daring, who's a regular of Sayles. It is kind of like a living novel. It crosses the past and the present. As with most of John Sayles' films, he edits it himself. He uses such a clever, simple device to cross the line between past and present. So you'll have a scene in the present and he'll just pan the camera to perhaps into the floor or the sky, and then the camera will turn back and we're in the past or the present, depending which scene the first scene is. It's just a wonderful transition. It's simple, but it shows you how the past and present are connected. Things that happen in the present also happened in the past, because as we know, if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it. It has a wonderfully subversive ending, which if it was a mainstream film probably wouldn't get away with. It looks beautiful, obviously the acting's exemplary and the script is wonderful, worthy of an Oscar nomination, whatever that means. Yeah, I know I'm biased. I always have this kind of disclaimer every time I put a John Sayles film in my 100 favourite films. But Lone Star is a stonker. It's just a beautiful film. Speaking of which, we're back to Japan for Mizoguchi's Sancho the Bailiff, or Sancho Deo, who bizarrely, the character of Sancho is actually the villain of the piece. It's not actually the hero, or even though there isn't really a hero. Again, with a lot of Mizoguchi's films, it's the price of destroying families. It follows a family who's broken up. The son and daughter end up being in a work camp. The mother and father get split up. It's about the son and the daughter trying to find their parents again. It's brutal, but it's also beautiful. Mizoguchi's use of diagonal trees to split the frame, separate people, is very good. This is the Criterion Blu-ray, which is Region A, which has a commentary and interviews with critics, assistant directors and actress Kyoko Kagawa, and obviously a booklet as well. Again, my favourite Mizoguchi film does tend to kind of change every now and again, but Sancho the Bailiff is just, it's devastating. The ending is pretty devastating. Again, it's brutal, but there is a beauty to it. Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. I think it's worthy of anybody's top 150 list. Next is a film that's probably not going to be anybody's top 150 list apart from mine. It's The Lodger by John Bram, and it's a Laird Krieger, George Sanders classic. For me, it's one of the best Jack the Ripper films, if not the best Jack the Ripper films. This is a Kino Lorber Region A, and as you know, Kino Lorber special features tend to come and go, but this one's got two commentaries, a making of The Lodger featurette and The Lodger radio show performed by Vincent Price, and a 2007 restoration comparison. As I've said before, I'm biased towards Laird Krieger as well. One of the great tragedies of cinema that he died so young, after only making a handful of films. He's got Hangover Square, Lubitsch's Heaven Can Wait, I Wake Up Screaming, which again is on Kino Lorber as well, and he just makes an amazing Jack the Ripper. He's complex, it's not simple, you can see the psychology almost happening. It's very animalistic, but still with the intelligence. Again, it's a nippy film, 84 minutes. You know, I kind of came for George Sanders, but you leave with this just amazing admiration for Laird Krieger and how just amazing he was, and kind of ahead of his time as far as what he was doing, as far as, keep saying as far as, with trying to bring the psychology of a character onto the screen so the audience can actually see it. It's just an amazing performance. It's a really tight, creepy little film with a dazzling turn by Laird Krieger. So that's The Lodger from 1944, which I would highly recommend, as well as Hangover Square and I Wake Up Screaming and Heaven Can Wait. Next is just a film that I obviously personally love, but it's not perhaps for everybody, and that's Bedazzled by Stanley Donen. Not the Liz Hurley, Brendan Fraser remake. This may be directed by Stanley Donen, but this is really Dudley Moore and Peter Cook's film. Yes, you could argue it's hasn't aged the best. It is from 1967, so there's a lot of 60s-ness in it. But it's just got a wonderful script about a man who sells his soul to the devil for wishes. Peter Cook is just so droll and fantastic as Beelzebub. The way he tricks Dudley Moore, so all his wishes don't kind of work out as he wants the woman of his dreams. And Peter Cook is always there undercutting him. It does actually bring up theological questions, but in a fun way. It is episodic, so there's like some episodes you'll probably prefer better than others. Raquel Welch turns up as Lillian Lust. It's playful, but there is actually deeper meaning to the film, and you just kind of go away realising what an amazing talent Peter Cook was that perhaps wasn't fully realised, because he did have a bit of a self-destructive streak. Dudley Moore plays the perfect foil, but this is really Peter Cook's film. He's absolutely amazing in it. You know, one of the episodes, Dudley Moore wants to be a pop star, to have all the girls adore him. So we have this kind of, he's on the equivalent of Top of the Pops or whatever kind of version of a hit parade you want to pick. And all the girls are going crazy for Dudley Moore, and then Peter Cook just steals the show because he turns up with his song, and of course it's just Peter Cook essentially just talking, saying about how he doesn't care about anybody, and of course all the girls just like swoon at his feet, and Dudley Moore is beaten once again. It's just so good. Again, the humour is not for everybody, but as a Peter Cook showcase, it's just absolutely wonderful. But definitely 60s. Next is 2001 by Kubrick. Now, as a film fan, you do sometimes get a little bit jaded, even with films that you love, but you've seen them so many times. Perhaps you're not as amazed with them as you first were. But 2004, 2001 is a film that every time I watch it, I'm in awe. It's one of those films that, you know how they did things. You know, when the guy's jogging round, I know how they did that, but every time I see it, I'm still like, that's amazing. You know, the Blue Danube with the ship docking, you know how it's done, but you just get engrossed in it, and you get into like the trance of it, and you just go, you're still awestruck, especially if you see it in the biggest screen you can. Yes, the bit with the monkeys at the start, the bit with the apes at the start could perhaps be a little bit shorter. I remember seeing it for the first time when I was very young. It was actually probably halfway through it on a black and white television. Yes, there were black and white televisions in the olden days. Especially in the end scene with the Stargate and then Bowman appearing in different versions of himself. That just confused the hell out of me. As a child, that was just like it was too much to process. But seeing it again, the preciseness of it, even in the boardroom, when the character gets up to walk and the other character gets up and they both get to their points at exactly the same time, It is one of the rare films that still, no matter how many times I watch it, still gives me that sense of awe. Yes, it's been parodied. Yes, it's been ripped off a lot. Yes, there's been essays and books written about what it means and what it's about. But 2001 is almost like the very nature of cinema, as far as that feeling of awe, that feeling of, I've never seen anything like this. Made in 1968. It still has an impact now. And it's still a dazzling piece of work. Even when you know how they did it, which makes it even better, I think. Next, something a little bit different. It's another Hal Hartley. It's Simple Men. That's the Artificial Eye release. And that's the release in the Long Island Trilogy Blu-ray set, which you can buy from halhartley.com, which I did because I love Hal Hartley. And I love these films. Made in 1992. It's the simple tale of there's Robert Burke, that's not Robert Burke, that's Karen Silas, that's Robert Burke. About two brothers, played by Robert Burke and Bill Sage, who try and reconnect with their father who's escaped from hospital. He's a radical ex-shortstop. And they come across Karen Silas and Elena Lowenson, who live in this small village, who they track down that their father might be there, and they interact with various strange characters, one played by Martin Donovan, who's a very angry fisherman who has feelings for Karen Silas, but Robert Burke wants to have feelings for her as well. If you've never seen a Hal Hartley film, you might go, what is what? But if you love Hal Hartley, the film is an absolute blast. It's also got Damien Young, who would appear in Amateur as a very self-reflective sheriff. The dialogue, as in all Hal Hartley films, might seem a little bit off-kilter, but Hal Hartley was doing this before lots of people were doing it. Hal Hartley, even though he's not appreciated as much as he should be, kind of was one of the leaders of that late 80s, early 90s quirkiness, which has almost now become a kind of cliche. But his characters are just wonderful. Yes, they talk in a kind of clipped, sometimes odd way, very much like Mamet's dialogue. It's poetry to the ear. His use of music, which he mostly composes himself under the pseudonym Ned Rifle, is wonderful, as it always is. It's funny, it's a blast. Again, there's not a lot of plot to Hal Hartley films, particularly. You know, even Amateur, which made it onto this list as well, he said was an action film with flat tire. Again, this one isn't. There's a road movie, which kind of comes to a grinding halt. But again, Hal Hartley films are never really about plot, they're about character, they're about nuance, and they're a whole lot of fun. And Simple Men and Amateur are just fantastic. So is Trust, which might not make it onto the list, but it's not that far off. So from that, we go to 1973 and The Friends of Eddie Coyle, with Robert Mitchum and Peter Boyle, directed by Peter Yates. This is one of the best late Robert Mitchum films, along with The Yakuza, where he plays really a small time loser criminal who kind of accidentally gets involved with a string of bank robberies and underworld machinations kind of get him involved. It's a 70s film, it's a quintessential 70s film, so it's shot in a very kind of loose, dirty way. You know, it's not perfect compositions and anything like that. It's earthy. It's pretty much all on location. There's a real sense of decay and society really kind of bombed out. It's a beautiful kind of horrible film as far as visually, but Mitchum plays another one of those characters that he often played that is completely doomed, but kind of knows he's completely doomed. He's trying to escape, he's trying to get out, but he's never actually going to get out. Peter Boyle plays another slimy character, as he often did in the 70s. Richard Jordan is very good as well, as a police officer. Again, plot wise, it's very oblique. You have to have patience to kind of realise what's going on. Like a lot of the great 70s films, it doesn't spoon feed you. It's just a wonderful 70s film. There's not much else to add. You know, if you know what a quintessential 70s film looks and sounds like, then that's what Friends of Eddie Coyle is. This is Eureka Masters of Cinema release. It's also on Criterion as well. Next is Cronenberg's Crash. This is the Blu-ray media book from Germany. Look at that cover. Crash I actually saw in the cinema, and it was quite a funny experience, because like a lot of Cronenberg films, it's funnier than people give it credit for, but because of the hubbub about it, it was banned in the UK. A lot of people went to kind of see it expecting an erotic thriller, which it's not, expecting, you know, wonderfully choreographed, exciting car chases and car crashes, which it doesn't have. So for the people who weren't Cronenberg or Ballard fans, it was kind of an odd film, because it wasn't as sexy or as exciting as people thought it was going to be. But it's just so good. And the Blu-ray, there's also a 4K, an Arrow releasing a 4K and a Blu-ray quite soon as well. After not seeing it that many times since I saw it in the cinema, watching it again, it's just so good. It's about a group of people that are kind of push their experience levels to the max and want to experience more. It's about a society that's disconnected, as we're all getting more and more disconnected through technology and social isolation. Again, Cronenberg being Cronenberg, he's way ahead of the curve on most things. I mean, this was made in, 1996, 1995, something like that. And he's way ahead of the curve. The actors, James Spader, Deborah Unger, Holly Hunter, Eliza Koteas, it's amongst their best work, because when you work with Cronenberg, you know you're of a certain quality of film. The soundtrack's really good by Howard Shore. You know, it's a kind of unusual one. It looks beautiful now on an upgrade. It's still a troubling film. It's still a difficult film. It still makes you feel uncomfortable at certain points. But again, that's what great art should be. And Crash is great art. Next is John Frankenheimer's Seconds. This is a Criterion DVD, number 667 for those keeping score at home. And this is Eureka Masters of Cinema Blu-ray, which is spine number 122 for people keeping score at home. This is a Frankenheimer film that kind of gets forgotten about between The Manchurian Candidate and 7 Days of May, which are both excellent as well. But Seconds, I think, is the one that is probably more timeless, because it is about this wonderful company that gives you a second chance at life by essentially changing your life, making you a completely new person. And we're all about that in the 21st century. We're all about changing our physical appearance. We're all about trying to grasp for something that's better than the lives that we have. So that's why I think Seconds, which was made in 66, I think, hasn't aged that badly. Yes, there's a scene with some hippies at a wine party festival that's perhaps aged a little bit, but the general premise of the film I don't think will ever age, because as human beings, as a society, we're always looking for the next thing that makes us better. We're always trying to improve our lives. We're always dissatisfied with what we've got. It's arguably Rock Hudson's best performance. Murray Hamilton turns up, strangely enough, playing another sleazy guy. He's come a long way since being the mayor of Jaws. Sorry, grew up to be the mayor of Jaws. Yeah, he would leave this film and then go to Amity and become the mayor. It's shot beautifully. Is it James Wong Howe that may have shot it? I'm not sure about that. It might be. On the Masters of Cinema release, there's a appreciation by Kim Newman, which is always appreciated. Ralph Bellamy, not Ralph Bellamy. That's a complete. I always think of Ralph Bellamy. Yes, it's not Ralph Bellamy who plays the old guy who gets turned into the new guy. Yes, it is James Wong Howe. Sorry for drifting off there. It does the cinematography. There's a wonderful nightmarish dream sequence. It is a dark film. I know it's kind of cliched to go, oh, but it's a dark film. But this is a dark film. Again, about identity. What makes us us? And if we change our physical appearance, does that change our internal appearance? It's just a dazzlingly good film. Again, darkly humorous, but with a wonderful message. You kind of wonder what ever happened to Frankenheimer after he made like 3 masterpieces or close to masterpieces, and Seconds certainly is one of them. Don't worry, only 2 more to go. Next one is Dead of Night from 1945. One of the best portmanteau films ever made, in my opinion. Yes, there's a couple of stories that are perhaps a little weak, but there is a couple of stories that will give you a bit of the willies. Plus, Dead of Night has the best kind of linking story, because sometimes, you know, a portmanteau is essentially people come to a place, they hear stories or tell stories, we see the stories, and then it ends with a twist or something like that. But Dead of Night's resolution is, for me, the best resolution of the portmanteau type of film. It's about an architect who turns up at this country house and realises that he seems to have been there before, he seems to have met the people before, but maybe it's in dreams, so he tells people the dreams, and then the guests each take turns to go, oh, I've had a dream or heard something weird that happened to these people, and we see these stories, and they range from creepy and disturbing to really disturbing. Yes, the golf story, which is injected for a little bit of humour, hasn't aged the best. Is meant for light relief, but perhaps doesn't really work as well as the other ones do. It's really creepy. Obviously the ventriloquist episode of Michael Redgrave is the more famous one. But it's just so good. I mean, you said it was made in 1945. Still very creepy. And like I said, the linking story, the overarching story is just so good. And it is one of those films that just gets into your head. And the more you think about the resolution of the linking story, just the better it becomes. So finally, this is probably on nobody's favourite 150 list, but this is my list, so there you go. It's Robert Aldridge's Attack with Jack Palance, Lee Marvin and Eddie Albert. It's just so good. It's a zero budget war film about this cowardly commander played by Eddie Albert, who's always putting Jack Palance's crew in impossible situations, and Lee Marvin is Eddie Albert's officer because he owed his dad a favour. That's how Eddie Albert got the commission and became an officer, even though Lee Marvin can't stand Eddie Albert. And Jack Palance is just, I mean, there's at one point where he threatens to stick a grenade down Eddie Albert's throat and pull the pin. Again, it's all pretty much studio bound. It's low budget, you can tell it's low budget, but it's such an intense film. Jack Palance has never been better. Lee Marvin is just at his surly best. Eddie Albert is just wonderful as this kind of slimy guy who's essentially a coward but can't man up, but he's only there because of privilege and because of who his daddy was. There's just so much packed into, again, it's under 90 minutes. It's never going to be on the greatest films of all time list, but I just love it so much. I think I first saw it like on afternoon television in Britain. And the ending is like stunning, but realistic as well, but somewhat downbeat. It obviously wasn't a major studio picture, because again it is pretty low budget, but it's one of Robert Aldridge's best. There's a real kind of venom in the film. This is a Spanish Blu-ray, by the way. But it's just so enjoyable. I mean, Lee Marvin, Jack Palance and Eddie Albert, can't ask for much more than that. So that's another 15 of my favourite 150 films, obviously not ranked, which means we've got one episode left. Again, I think this is a fun exercise to perhaps see in a year and do it again, and see what's changed, which ones have fallen out of the 150 and whatever. I know it's kind of impossible because you could easily do like a top 300 or whatever, but after I do the last episode, I'm going to do an episode of the cutting floor of my 100 favourite films, and this was suggested by Chris Mohan. Go and check out his channel, I'll leave a link because it's an excellent channel, about the films that say 5 years ago would have made the list that don't make the list now. And it's not to say that they're suddenly bad films, but they're perhaps not as good as they used to be. I've maybe moved on a little bit as far as my taste, or maybe you can see the flaws a bit more, but they're still good films, but they just wouldn't now make the 150. So that's technically 2 more videos in this series to do. So thanks very much for watching. Again, leave a like or comment about your feelings for these films, or subscribe if you haven't. I'd greatly appreciate it. And hopefully you'll join me again for episode 10 of 150 favourite films not ranked, because that would be madness. So this is Soldier Ronan from Solitude Ronin Films, saying thank you very much and farewell.